any wargame, anytime. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Any Wargame, Anytime. I'm Bozz, joined today by Dan and by Sam and by our special guest, Andy. So Dan's going to MC it today, so take it away.
Hey, thanks for having us on. So first of all, Bozz, how you doing?
Very well, very well. I'm looking forward to talking about some wargaming.
Yeah. Sam, how's everything going?
Oh, pretty good. Can't complain. I mean, I could, but nobody really cares. So,
Well, that's no complaining is just that's what we do. That's the reason we started this. So I'm doing well. Good to get our feet wet into OPR 3.0. We've just been busy, but also excited to have our guest. And our guest is Andy from Spymaster Gaming, which is a YouTube channel that we follow. He does great work. We'll post that link in our description. But Andy, so Andy, how you doing, man?
I'm very well, thank you. It's been a hectic few days. It's nice to talk games. I feel like I haven't been able to talk games properly for at least a week, so this is a nice change of pace. Thank you very much for having me. It's it's great to be asked to do something like this. It's the first time it's happened, so hopefully I won't disappoint.
No, it's our first time to have another fellow YouTuber who you kind of I've been following you since you started your channel. I think we sort of started our channels around the same time. And so you really also you were one of the things that gave me inspiration to say, oh wow, we can do something more than just bat reps, because you do good bat reps on your channel. But you also sort of do the commentary side. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So what made you really wanted to start a YouTube channel? What made you kind of get this idea in your head?
Someone told me that I sounded knowledgeable, which in of itself is not a good reason to start a YouTube channel. But I'm quite strong in my convictions, and in terms of how the wargaming scene is at the moment, I was getting very disillusioned, especially towards Games Workshop. And I'm not saying it in a negative term, but in terms of a lot of the content that was being put out, it's all the same coverage, i.e. the latest releases, there's focus on the latest rules updates. It's very, very samey, and you get exposed to that so much. And I understand people like that, and it's absolutely fine. But for someone who's wanting a bit more of a broader view of the hobby in general, it was becoming a bit, well, not soul destroying, that's a bit dramatic, but it wasn't enough variety for me. And I thought, you know what, there's a lot of companies out there doing good work, one-page rules included among the number, that need that exposure to sort of showcase to people there's other options out there. There's potentially better rule sets, things that may actually pique your interest if you just looked a bit further than what you're used to. And that's where I wanted to take the channel, really, was just focusing on these smaller systems, but also to focus on sort of wargaming history as well. I think we as a society tend to focus on the here and now. We get caught up in the latest releases, hype train and all that. But there's not a lot of sort of time to sort of pause and reflect on all the good work that's come before. And I think there's systems out there, I refer to them as like dead games, but they're not truly dead, because a lot of them have really loyal diehard communities that have modded them, that have house ruled them to the nth degree, and just created these wonderful little communities around these games that have existed for years. And they deserve a spotlight as well, because they obviously touched a lot of people, over the years. So why not draw a new audience in as well to those sort of games? Those are the two sort of broad angles that I wanted to cover, really, with the channel. I wouldn't say I wouldn't cover Games Workshop stuff. I think if there was something that really interested me, then maybe I would do a video. But at this point, all I see is just the cycle continuing, and there's not enough to capture my interest to actually do any content on it. But now we're looking at one-page rules, obviously, a new edition where we're seeing some minor adjustments, but what is fundamentally a balanced update to a very good core system. And that I can get more excited about. So,
no, that's great. And I want to plug, you did a really, we'll get into it, but I really enjoyed your last video about talking about, and I think it's very timely, about the failed competitor of Havoc. We won't get into this one, but it's a really good video that I think you do a great job of sort of explaining how, again, I'll save it, but I'd say it's a great video to go watch that really covers some of the failings that if you do want to compete with GW, it's really interesting that you point out some things that perhaps game companies should avoid. So we won't, like I said, we'll let you guys go watch the video, but great work. You've covered a little bit, but is there, about your audience? So you've covered a little bit. Is there anything? So you've talked about what you're doing now, but what about the future? What would you do? You like what you're doing now, or do you actually see your content kind of expanding further? What do you kind of?
I think in terms of sort of regularity, I'd like to sort of speed up with the actual releases of the videos in one aspect. I think what I'm conscious of is obviously trying to game the algorithm, but remain as neutral as possible. I think where you've got content creators who are obviously doing it full time, I'm not doing it full time. This is very much a hobby at this point. They will use the terms, Warhammer, Games Workshop, obviously to gain traction. And then obviously it becomes sort of an echo chamber around those topics. I want to try and expand, but with a view of using the terms smartly to capture people and draw them into, like I say, failed competitors for Games Workshop. It's not a good way of doing it, admittedly, but obviously it's a way of drawing in an audience if they're actively searching for those terms. I just want to keep on presenting alternative options. That's all I see going forward in the immediate future. Potentially doing some hobby related things as well. If I can, if I deem my work actually up to standard for showcasing from a hobby perspective. I don't think I'm there yet, but maybe in the future I'll do that as well. So
yeah. Well, so alternatives, you mentioned it. So what is there any particular alternative that you just really have a lot of fun with right now? So like you said, you're talking about what's an alternative game for GW that you're really enjoying?
So one of the ones that I had a lot of fun with was a rank and flank system called Oathmark. I don't know if you are aware of Oathmark. So in the UK, there's Osprey Publishing, which is one of the big games publishers. So Joseph McCullough, he's the author of Oathmark. He's also done Frostgrave. He's done Stargrave.
Frostgrave.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of Oathmark. It's like his newest thing.
Yeah, he did it just before the pandemic, and then all of the work sort of shut down because of the pandemic, and then he brought out a couple of expansions as well. But it's an excellent little rank and flank game where, again, you're not seeing too much variety between the core armies. It follows these fantasy tropes of orcs and goblins, dwarves and elves, but it's very much set in a low fantasy setting, i.e. believable medieval sort of warfare, nothing fantastical, hardly any magic. But the unique concept of it is it's based around you forming a kingdom, and the kingdom has different regions, and the regions allow you to unlock certain troops. So if elements of your kingdom get invaded, the next campaign game, those troops are off limits. You can't take them.
Cool.
You have to rethink your whole army list, depending on how you've either succeeded or failed in the previous games. So it's a really nice concept that I've not seen elsewhere.
So it's designed as a campaign game.
Pretty much, yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
we love rank and flank. Me and Sam, we were rank and flank people. So
it's funny. I had an idea like what you're describing that I was trying to do at one point, and I'm glad to hear that somebody has tried that idea in an actual game, because I've always thought I've thought that would be a fun way to do that, to kind of incorporate capturing territory and whatnot into a rank and flank tactics game. So,
and it's done in a very balanced way as well. Like I say, the actual differences between the units and nominal, they're very much sort of thematic, obviously, to just try and get a bit of difference, i.e. dwarves are a bit slower than elves, as you'd expect, but they're better, they're heavy hitting in close combat, like you'd expect. So, but you could broadly look at an army and say, I know what the capacity and capability of that army is to actually put you in a good space to go up against it. No gotcha moments, just sort of The only one I don't like is the undead, because the undead are a nightmare to play against in most systems. But very, very good. And he's a very interesting chap as well. I have to say, I like his other stuff as well. I occasionally get Frostgrave to the table. He's, I think he's a very good game designer. So,
and that's such an important concept in wargaming too, that I think gets lost on people, both players and game designers. When you have small differences, those differences actually become more meaningful. And I think people get caught into this trap of, I want to have these things that have these, like, this is this crazy special rule and whatnot. But the problem is once you start doing that, you get into the situation where the knowledge base required to effectively play your game is too big. And, you know, you're going to sit down at the table and, like, I've sat down at the table before, like, this is like in old Warhammer days, where I looked at my opponent's list or whatever, like, we're playing 2 different games. And it doesn't take that much to get to that point. And it's I just wanted to point that out, because I think this is a really important just point that's lost on people. Having small differences does not actually create less variety. Sometimes it creates more and more depth to the variety of lists, because, you know, you're able to still kind of understand where things are situated within the greater context.
Well, I liked in your previous video that you talked about, you did this review. Again, I won't get too much into that video, but you did say something that you like in a war game, which in that you said simple but tactical depth. And I want to go back to OPR. I sometimes on the interweb do hear people say OPR is more of a casual game. And maybe it's because it doesn't have all these special stratagems that you can pop and teleport things a million places. But that, to me, those sort of games to me actually have less tactical depth, because you sort of are going to be able to do that thing where games that are simple. Well, I want to get your thought. This is how I'm interpreting your words. So I'll let you, if I'm putting words, you know, if you can definitely say games that are simple actually can bring a lot of tactical depth. So did I characterize that way? Did I characterize you correct in that?
Absolutely. I think the main thing for me is, if you're relying on sort of your knowledge to triumph over an opponent rather than, and I know in war there's no such thing as a level playing field, but if you look at something historically, and I know we're talking about predominantly like a sci-fi game and it's fiction, but if you look at any military commander, why would you commit resources to the field unless you had a good idea of what you were going up against?
Yep.
No war is just fought on the knowledge of, I don't have a clue what this army that I'm going up against does. You know, that's not how it's ever worked in history.
Quite the opposite, in fact. You want to know as much about your opponent as humanly possible.
Exactly.
Because when you do get caught off guard,
that's 90% of the battle.
Yeah.
Look at Art of War and stuff.
Yeah.
90% of the battle is fought before the actual battle. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting.
You get into this, and when you don't know what you're getting into, you get instances like, you know, when both the Hunnic invasions and the Mongol invasions of Europe are a great example, where people didn't know how to react and how to fight against those types of armies. And there was a period of time when they just were beating everybody because no one knew what to do. And so this is an important thing. Like, you don't, you know, and I agree with your point very strongly that, you know, yes, we're looking at fantasy and sci-fi, but it should still be based on some level of realism. And, you know, we can kind of look at history and say, this is how things worked in this context, and this is how it kind of would translate to a fantasy or science fiction setting.
And that's it, isn't it? I mean, you can look at broadly, you can look at any army in OPR and you know roughly what their capabilities are just at a glance. You can look at the core rules and you'd be like, okay, they may have 1 or 2 tweaks to the special rules where you think, oh, actually, I may need to have a bit of more knowledge around that. But, you know, so again, we talk about stereotypes. The dwarf guilds, for example, you know they're going to be slow as anything because they're dwarves. You know that
they're going to be nice and tough.
Yeah, you know that you don't want to get into melee with their berserkers because
they got hammers. They got those magma hammers.
Yeah, because that's the trope.
But when you're, say, if you're looking at it from a, you know, say a 40k perspective, is it a case of, okay, well, I knew what the capability was last week, but they've just got a buff where they can teleport behind me now, and then they can just absolutely, apparently an army has changed its core way of functioning within the space of a month, even though, okay, that's fine. So I think that's the key thing, is being able to look at something and assess it quite quickly, and you should be able to do that not having any real prior knowledge of that army, just a core understanding of the system. I'm comfortable going to a table now, and if I know broadly, if I know what the army is, I broadly know what it's capable of, and then I can plan accordingly. And that's what every war game should strive for, not relying on, actually it's got stratagems that I'm not aware of because I haven't bought their codex, or it's not a fair fight in that regard. It's literally just you need to do a lot of homework, which I don't think is fun fundamentally.
That's exactly right. And to give the example of the obvious example, my last game of 40k was an exam, like my last handful before that, and I failed it because I had only read my book and the rule book and half of my opponent's book. I think universal special rules throughout any war game is a really key thing. If there's half a dozen, if there's 2 dozen, if I've only got one set of special rules to learn and they apply across the board to certain armies in certain ways, happy days.
Yeah. And then you can make really minor adjustments from there to create more unique scenarios, but you really don't need to do a lot at that point. And then it should be like you can sit down and look at the list, and even if it's got this special rule, but it's like, it's elite, it has this elite rule, but in this circumstance, well, I understand how that works, and I don't have to here's the a paragraph of how this rule works, and on every other Tuesday, when you roll a 6, it gets crazy, and then you can't, you get in the gotcha moments are just not fun.
I've yet to play a game of 10th edition, but one of the guys from my local game group who has got a couple of games under his belt, and he plays one-page rules as well. I said, how are you finding it? And he said, I'm burnt out already after 2 games.
Wow.
Yeah. He just said it just doesn't compare. He found it very hard to go back after experiencing alternative activations, and he just didn't get the enjoyment from it. He thought, let's just do this. Let's get it out of the way to try it. And that was his attitude by game 2. And I thought that's quite sad, really, if that's the state of it already. Like I say, I can't comment personally because I've yet to take it to table. But just...
it feels not friendly. I definitely agree it was. So now OPR 3, I know you've ran OPR, but we have to try to be more balanced. So what do you think of it? But also, so tell us some good things, but also tell us some things that you think OPR could do that needs to work. Where do you think OPR could needs work?
Okay, so I think if we're going off the new changes to 3rd edition, there's a couple of things which I really like. Firstly, I think the fixing of poison as a special rule, I think that is wonderful. And I can only say this after experiencing a Demons of Plague army in the last tournament I was organizing, and the exploding 6s on that. I'm glad that they've basically made it reroll defense instead. I think that's a much nicer special rule. I think the psychic changes that they've made, or caster as it's called now, I see that as only a positive. After 3 tournaments that I've organized, I don't think I could probably count on one hand the amount of players that took psychic characters just because the points cost benefit was just not there to field them. And I think now with the sort of stacking of the counters every turn, it should be quite interesting to see what people can pull off with a more more routinely if obviously their caster is kept alive up until the third and fourth round and not taken out by an enemy sniper. But so a couple of nice things there. I quite like the introduction of entrenched as well. I think that's a pretty cool rule. And I say that as a human defense force player because it applies to quite a lot of my support vehicles. So it's quite a nice little buff. So -2 to shooting if you're outside of 12 inches. So that's great. It's a free little upgrade. Can't complain there. A couple of things that I have taken issue with, and I think are probably not the right course of action. A lot of their changes were based on the volume of attacks. Now, for me, their movement away from large volume of attacks, I think the heart's probably in the right place, but how it plays out from my experience is the volume is needed for those weaker armies to actually make a dent, especially when you're looking at low quality armies. One of my friends was playing the Soul Snatchers, which as bog standard quality 5, he needed to equip them with the volume of attacks to actually put a dent in anything. And similarly, as a human defense force player, you need sort of more shots at lower quality to actually make a dent in the enemy's armor. I think how it probably could have been mitigated a bit better. I know they've tried to sort of level out in terms of, say, for example, the flamer rules, where they've made it reliable and changing it from 6 attacks to 1 attack blast 3. If they just whack some armor piercing in there, at least give it a chance to get through, because an enemy could shrug that off quite easily on anything with quality 3 would shrug that off no problem. And you see some armies as well which are melee focused, where they've nerfed Furious as well.
Oh yeah, that's one of my big ones too.
Yeah, if you're an orc player,
yes, right,
it's just that's your bread and butter, severely impacted really. And I was talking about it with Sam and another of the guys from our group. So we had a game in 2nd edition where I played Battle Brothers. I had some Assault Brothers, which had Furious as the special rule, and he had 3 Havoc Brother Destroyers. So it was 10 and 10 versus 3. I put the best part of 30 attacks out, and still, with no armor piercing, couldn't take out 3 destroyers. And I just thought, so now, even if I had really good attacks with that, if I got, say, at the best 20, no way I'm getting through that. A bit of an oversight there, I think. If they balanced it out with some more armor piercing, even just AP1.
Well, I think their heart is in the right place, and I actually share some of your concerns. I think I'm hoping I'm going to give. I feel OPR, like I said, we think things to work on. I like to present it like that because they really are trying to do their best, and I think they will try to bring that around. I would actually like to see more of their ideas tied to quality, more point changes that are sort of dynamically tied to quality as a % damage increase. And that may help. Like I said, it may actually mean some of these lower quality armies are able to get an extra attack or 2 in the % of they are at quality 5 or 6 is really giving them a 3rd attack, So I definitely think, I definitely, I agree with you right there. Okay. Anything else? Yeah. What else kind of runs out to you about the third edition that you maybe want some tweaks on?
I think my main concern, and it's purely because I've experienced quite a lot of games against robot legions, and I mentioned Demons of Plague, is regeneration. The changes to regeneration, I think, they've somehow made it stronger. And
you are a man after my own heart. These 2 things you brought up are my exact things as well.
Rending, and again, talking from a predominantly human defense force player, rend doesn't exist as a concept really, apart from a couple of the poison, heroes. Really. Yeah, or poison. And it when you've got Ren's changed now to -1 on the regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just ignoring regeneration. I think the only army that can bypass regeneration completely from my cursory glances at the new army books is the dwarf guilds with their magma rule. That's the only thing
expensive though. But magma is,
yeah.
I don't know. I think magma is a little overpriced, but it is. I think. Yeah, we won't. We had some discussions in our earlier ones about how these sort of hard counter rules are sort of a problem, because I, as a high elf fleet player, can just murder people with regen, right? I'm like, I literally don't. I think regen sucks. But then you're right. You and Bozz, you think it's overpowered, and it's just because I get raining on everything, which I think is actually a problem for high elf fleets or dark elves to sort of give an army a hard counter rule. But I think all these, exactly. I think it's definitely a good point. Definitely a good point. Okay.
But I'd say with yours though, you pay the points for more elite troops. Everything is pricey in it. You pay for it.
Well, and I overpay when I don't fight. And that's the thing. Exactly. When I go up against things that don't have regen, I overpay for rending. Or dark elf players overpay for poison. Yeah, that's true.
I think the one saving grace with the robot legions in particular, I'm glad that they've changed the robot rule now that it's rolls on a 1 to a 3. When it's testing to see if any of them collapse instead of a morale test. I quite like that. But fundamentally, I think that without sort of having snipers in place to sort of deal with the heroes that are handing out those 4+ regen buffs, there's no easy counter to it. I mean, some of their elite troops are a 2+ save anyway. So 2+ with regen, and
sometimes 4 regen, and they're undead.
Yeah.
So they can't, like, you get those, we've mentioned this before, you get those guys on an objective, they are there. Like, there's no wavering, no nothing.
I think the only mercy is that they're slow as well. So
they have long range though as well, though. They kind of, I don't know.
Mid range. Most of them it's either 18 or 24 inch. It's 18 to, so it's they're not the longest shooters, but I think that's my main concern is how it plays out. And I think, but I'm so glad that the combo now with the Demons of Plague has gone, where it was poison, rending, and regen.
They had some blast and poison too.
It's a nasty army to go up against.
You're kind of hitting on it a little bit. I know you've ran a tournament. By the way, go check out his channel. He does some great reports for battle reports. I love your format. How competitive would you like OPR to be? Again, it's really an open question. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but you do sound more like us. If I'm picking that up, is that you sound like a pretty competitive player? Yeah,
I am. It's completely the opposite, actually. I am not competitive in the slightest. When I run a tournament, I do it in a jokey manner. I pretty much abide by a simple rule, which I pick cool before winning. If something's thematic, and I will always give my opponent the advantage. If they are a centimeter or so out and they want to try a shot off, I will let them take the shot because I want to see something cool happen. I really don't care about preserving my troops. I would rather see something epic happen. I mean, for example, in the one tournament I had, let's say playing against Havoc Brothers, my opponent had a heavy walker. I had my Battle Brothers heavy walker. He was a bit out on the charge, and I said, you know what, go for it. Let's see what happens. And then he ended up with the systems damage rules we'd put in effect for the tournament. He one-shotted my heavy walker because he did enough wounds in one round of combat. And I thought, yeah, that was fun. That was fun to watch. How do I respond to that? That's my mentality. I'd rather see something funny happen and respond to it than be very focused on, on the trying to win aspect of it. And I think the competitive element of it, I view tournaments as a structure for bringing people together more than anything competitive in that sense. I think what we've done locally in our area, we've fostered quite a good core group of people who've really taken on the core ethos of one-page rules, i.e. it's a game, let's have some fun with it. And that's what I try and sort of propagate to other people as well. I said, don't take it too seriously. I think in the three tournaments that we've had, I think I've had to adjudicate once on one decision because people are that laissez-faire with it. I think in terms of what they've got in terms of their actual tournament structure they put in place with the chess clocks and that, I'd say it's probably a bit detrimental. It's probably overthinking it a bit too much, to be honest, because we're adults. And again, if you're coming in with a sort of a win at all costs attitude, I'd probably rethink whether it's the right system for you. There's other systems and we know what those other systems are, which are more geared towards the competitive player. It's
okay.
So I'm going to disagree with you here. We're going to have a nice little debate, hopefully. I think that you can still have all the fun moments and all of the joy of wargaming and still have a game that's competitively balanced. And when I say competitive, I'm not thinking like, oh, that's you're a fraction of an inch out, or you're, or I'm going to just bring the, garbage spam list of whatever and kill everything that I fight, bring the most broken stuff. I'm not talking about that. I think if anything, the system should help mitigate your ability to do that. But I also think that, when I sit down and play, I am trying to win. And I think it's always more fun to win than lose. That's even when you lose spectacularly.
And let's put this in context, Andy. Me and Sam play on chess. We in our tournaments in King's War, we do play on chess clocks, and that's stuff. That kind of shows you we are on sort of that other end that you sort of like chess clocks are a thing. Yeah,
and part of the reason they've kind of had to implement that is because if you're paying a lot to go to a big tournament and there's going to be 3 games that day and they have to keep the schedule, and there are people who if they're not held, they're going to sit there and debate their turn, and then you're going to have to end the game a turn early because they have to start the next round, and it creates the situation where well I would have won if he had just played faster and we had gotten to the last turn, and the chess clocks and things like are a way to mitigate that.
Absolutely, and I think I'm probably speaking from a position of privilege, if anything, because I know I can rely on the majority of people who rock up at my events to self adjudicate, and they're quite capable of discussing a rule through, and they're not gonna end up in that situation where they're dragging out their activations. I think if we were attracting a broader base, which we will do in the future because it is growing, the amount of people who are interested, obviously one page rules is attracting more people. I will probably have to revisit my position about what I've said.
Yeah. And I would love that. And my position is I would say I come from the other end. I'm more of a Sam. I'm a competitive guy. But one of the things that I like about OPR is they actually give you the tools. Hey, go play casual. Have fun, but they also give you an own custom army builder and all these tools to say, you want to streamline and nitpick everything and get these hey, you can do that too. And I love that's the owner's thought process. He no other really system does that much to give their people and say, hey, go play super casual, have a blast, or hey, let's take these armies, let's streamline them, let's fine tune them, and let's get, what I mean? So I love that. I think it's the best of both worlds.
Well, and it's the transparency too, right?
Yeah.
It's everything. How things are pointed are easily apparent, and so anybody can you can look and understand how the system works, and how you would use it. It's that transparency I think is just really critical. I think OPR
takes a lot of courage too. Takes a lot of courage to do that because it opens it up to criticism. It's a lot of courage to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is like, there are going to be people who are going to find the broken combinations and whatnot. But it also, what it allows for is you to have this incredibly deep base to draw on, and a system that is very easy to understand, but still has a lot of tactical depth to it.
And I'd agree. And when I say I don't take it seriously, you've seen from my videos in terms of the list building.
You're a good player. You are a good player.
I put in.
He's a good player.
I put in core principles as to what I would take in a list,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't fine tune it to the level of, thinking through every decision. Yeah, broadly, I think I want a good mix of deadly. I want a good mix of blast. So I can take down big targets and mass infantry. That's broadly one of it, and then maybe a couple of specialist units to do some specialist work if it required it. But apart from that sort of broad brush thinking, which, as you say, Sam, is like it's the tools which most people could look at it and think that's quite easy to work out in terms of what I need. I don't go into any more granularity than that because I just don't think it needs it. I mean, when you're dealing with sort of secondary objectives and obviously the main objectives in the tournament, you adapt on the fly as anyone does. You don't know what your opponent's going to do until you actually get on the table. You can't prepare for any eventuality. So I think it's just about a case of, well, this is the hand I've been dealt. This is what I'm up against. How do we go from here? I find joy in that, in honesty. If I played against some prime brothers in one of the tournaments, and he took out a light walker, he took out a support vehicle, and he took out another unit on turn 1, and it was basically the cornerstone of my plan to use those. And I thought, okay, let's just adapt and let's have some fun with it. And I think that's it. I get more joy out of the interaction with the opponent in those games, and as long as it's like free flowing conversation and everyone's having a good time. And that's why I sort of like organizing the tournaments, because I see people just enjoying it and bonding over a game. I mean, I've been in tournaments in the past where, for other systems where the opponent won't talk to you unless it's about immediately what they're doing about their move.
They'll hand you your army and say, figure it out. What does it do? It says on the paper. Yep.
And I'm not, that attitude, I just think, is the antithesis of gaming. The word is gaming. It's war gaming.
Oh, I agree with you on that. That's an important thing.
So I think that you can hit, and I think you are hitting a good point, which is that whether we be competitive or casual, I think what you're really saying is sportsmanship.
Yeah,
sportsmanship.
That's it. I think that is the apt word. Yeah, it's not hard to do. I mean, I've had to write it in the tournament packs. Like, this is not a serious game. Just have fun with it. They're toy soldiers. Just remember why you do it.
Yeah,
we are all grown men playing with dolls, basically.
Oh, absolutely. And they're so cool.
Yeah, and they are cool. And
cool.
And if we get time in the diary, to maybe have a Saturday or a Sunday where we get to play for an extended amount of time away from all of our other responsibilities, why would you not want to have fun with it? Why would you want to turn it into a miserable experience for someone else? Or
so that really touches on kind of my take on it. I'm primarily a storyteller, and when I game, when I'm wargaming, when I'm tabletop roleplay gaming, whatever, I'm interested in the story. So I will make a list that fits the theme of what I want my army to look like, knowing full well that it's not optimized and it'll have some huge gaping holes in it. And I go to the table going, all right, so I'm not here to win at all costs. As Sam said, it's more fun to win. I love to win. Winning is good. Winning is much more of that, please. But at the end of the day, I'm interested in what story are the dice going to tell, and what story is my opponent and myself going to tell together. So to give your example, if I'm relying on a unit and it gets wiped first turn, that's awesome. That's a really good story. And then this happened, and then we had to rally and do this. So
I'm reminded historically of the Battle of Red Cliffs in China, in the Three Kingdoms, China, where everything that could possibly go wrong for the Wei army goes wrong. And it's a great story, and it's a great battle in history. And part of that is because, yes, everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong.
Well, it's been, I don't know. I mean, and I hope you don't, we'd love to have you back on in the future. It's just this, so go ahead. We're talking about OPR. So tell us, so you've already mentioned some of your armies. Tell us sort of what OPR games you prefer, what you'd like to play. Tell us what factions you play, but also, you know what? Tell us a faction. If one of your subscribers sent you $1 million or sent you said, go and pick an OPR army and it gets painted to the best theme, what would you if you had all the money in the world to pick an OPR army and to paint it with the theme, what would you like?
Okay, so two there. So I'll deal with the factions that I play currently then first.
Yeah.
So Human Defense Force predominantly. I have a load of old metal Games Workshop figures which need to see the light of day, and I enjoy using them because it just brings back memories of when I played with them when I was younger. They're always good to get on the table. I always like playing as the underdog. Humans are the underdog in most sci-fi situations, including one-page rules. So it's always good to play as the little guy. I actually started off playing with just Battle Brothers, though. That was where I really cut my teeth in the game. Just some old. I don't know if you remember the Dark Vengeance box set with the horrific Dark Angels scoops that they had in that, the Monopose Dark Angels scoops. That was pretty much the core of my first one-page rules army, because I was getting back into wargaming at the time, and I thought, yeah, let's just do this as a project. And I realized that the half of the Dark Vengeance box set was pretty much a fully fleshed out 2,000 point one-page rules army. I was like, great, that's gonna get me sorted. The next tournament I'm organizing in mid-October, I'm going to be using Titan Lords. I've got a bit of a funny thing that I've done with that, where, and please don't judge me for this, but I've not had a lot of time to get stuff to the painting table. I've actually bought 4 fake Gundam figures off Temu.
Nice.
And I'm going to build them, probably give them a bit of a paint job, and they've got some cool poses, and they've got the stands, so they're actually going to be legal because they've got bases. And yeah, I'm going to see how I get on with them, just using them as mini Titans, because I think it would just be funny. And that's why I like it. I like using stuff like that where, you know, your opponent will just laugh at it, not take it seriously. And
I love that one-page rules is minis agnostic. I love that you can just do that and have it be fun and have no one bat an eye and just have a laugh and get on with the game.
And that is an interesting point you mentioned. That's one of the things which I've had to sort of uncondition people locally. I've had people on the chats being like, "Oh, I want to run this, but this one model is equipped with this," and I'm like, "Mate, it doesn't matter as long as it's different." And you know when your opponent knows, and you don't change it halfway through the game. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah, just don't worry."
As an avid Gundam fan, I feel obligated to ask you which specific Gundams you got.
I don't think they have proper names. Hang on, I'll just have a look.
They similar to, but legally distinct from.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even go as far as saying they're legally distinct from it. Honestly, they are. Let's just have a look. Okie dokie. If it is called a full body movable assembly handmade toy model, and apparently it's the ideal Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving gift.
I do love Halloween, Christmas, Thanksgiving.
Yes, yeah, it's
my favorite holiday.
But to be fair, you know, they look the part, they'll do the job, and they'll look fun on the battlefield, and that's all that matters, really. So that's going to be my next one. If I had the funds for building any army, it's quite timely, actually, because they've just announced it a couple of days ago on their roadmap. So I have this resin dwarf figure.
Oh, yeah.
Which has been sat in my supply bin for a while. And he is... I was going to use him for Necromunda as a bounty hunter, but I haven't got round to using him. He's got a mohawk. He's got a big two-handed axe. He's got like a trench coat, and he looks cool as anything. And when they announced the Dwarf Guild's launch, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to turn him into a sci-fi Dane Ironfoot.
Oh, that's cool.
And the new models which they've launched, they've revealed for the Guardians and that, I thought that's the Iron Hills army. That's literally a sci-fi version of the Iron Hills army. Yeah. And I would do Space Erebor, Conquest of Erebor, but in space. I think that would be my theme.
Very cool. I recently upgraded to tier 2 because I want to start. It's the first time I want to print is the Dwarf Guilds. That's great. Well, man.
Even their artillery pieces look like they could be the sci-fi version of the ballista that they've got in the Hobbit film as well. I thought that was just nice. So
that's cool. Well, we wish we could continue to talk, and like I said, we know we're all guys of fun. We'd definitely love to have you on again. So thank you so much for coming on, Andy. Just again, guys, anyone listening, please go to YouTube, check out Spymaster Gaming. Great battle reports, great analysis. Really enjoy his work. So this is Daniel. I'm just going to sign off. Bozz, any last words?
Just that it's been a real pleasure to have you on. It's nice to talk to somebody who's in the same time zone as me for a change. And it's great to hear that the OPR scene where you are is gathering steam. I'm based up in the north. I'm up in Cumbria most of the time, and I'm trying so hard to get it off the ground there. And it's 40k land, unfortunately, but it's great to hear that the scene's going a bit stronger in the south.
Sam, last words.
Last words is I'm gonna say what I said last time. For everyone watching, go where the game is good, and that's really what we're all trying to capture here. Is we want to have fun with wargaming.
Thank you. All right, Andy, last words.
Just thanks once again for having me on. It's been a privilege, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, and I look forward to coming back with some more thoughts after I've gotten my teeth into the 3rd edition a bit more.
Any wargame, anytime.